Hello and welcome to Cooking Time. I'm David Martone, Executive Chef at Classic Time Cooking School, and we're making some wonderful stuff today. I'm celebrating the life, even though my in-laws have passed. We're celebrating the life of my mother-in-law. You've heard me talk about my mother-in-law a whole lot. So tonight we're gonna make her gravy, we're gonna make her eggplant Parmesan, an unbelievable dish, and her meatballs. So come right back with us. We're gonna cram 5 hours worth of stuff into 30 minutes, but we guarantee we'll have a great show for you. Hello and welcome to Cooking Time. I'm David Martone, Executive Chef at Classic Time Cooking School here in Westfield, New Jersey. And as I said, today we're celebrating the life of my mother-in-law, better known as Nana, or Jean to me. We have always had such a great time talking about experiences with my mother-in-law and cooking and dishes, and people always ask me about her. Sadly, she passed away a year ago Thanksgiving, but she had a couple of good years that we were able to take care of her here in Westfield, and she fought a courageous fight with Alzheimer's, but she left us a lot of great memories, and I'm going to share some of them with you with some good food. So as I said, tonight we're going to make her eggplant Parmesan, we're going to make her gravy, and we're going to make her meatballs. So the first thing I do, and I don't usually put gloves on, but I think I have to cut as much time off as possible. So this is going to save me trying to really get all this stuff in my hands. I have a bowl of ground veal. She always used veal for her meatballs, and she put nothing in her meatballs but veal, an egg, and a lot of grated cheese. While my family's recipes put tons of bread, she puts tons of cheese. Anybody else's meatballs that she would taste, anybody else's anything that she tastes, she'd always say, needs more cheese. So I'm just putting some salt and pepper. Not even any garlic in them. They were simple, well, we used to call them cheese balls, Nana's cheese balls. And a little bit of salt, and I'm just going to mix this up. They're just so delicious. I mean, you add this much cheese to anything and you simply can't go wrong. And as I said, I'm going to figure out ways to cut time off everything we're doing just to make this all happen in our 30-minute segment here. So I get this mixture nicely done. And really, you're going to see me put my hands in this again. But the initial mixing is just really where it would really get all into my hands. Okay, so that's mixed up nice. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just scoop up a bunch of balls of this, and then I'll come back and roll them. See, all these little shortcuts help out when you're doing something like this. Oh, that little piece goes there, this one goes here. Especially when you're working and coming home and trying to put good meals on the table, you have to figure out all these little shortcuts to make the timing work with everything you do. So this is just simply a measurement tool for me to make these, you know, somewhat similar in size. So they'll have to be formed and shaped, and I'll get that done while the gravy is actually cooking, which I have our pot already started. I had to cheat a couple of times and do a few things. So if I come back over here, I'm going to heat up my saute pan for the meatballs. I've actually got a little bit of her gravy going already because we're going to need that for the eggplant Parmesan, and this other one's going to take a couple hours to cook. So the first thing I did was I put some olive oil in the pan, and I browned an onion and some garlic. I just flattened out a couple of cloves of garlic, and they're really hard to see. Here's a piece of one. And I sliced up our onion pretty coarsely and sauteed the onion until it was lightly brown. She always takes out the onion and the garlic. We're using regular olive oil. Then I browned some meat, and I had pieces of, this is some beef short rib, and this is some pork loin. You can use pork neck bones, any other kind of meat that you'd want to put in it. She usually didn't put sausage in her. She'd cook sausage separately. So now what we do is we put in our paste. I didn't rip this off to disguise what brand it was. It's just that when I'm opening the paste, the can opener that I'm using tends to shred the outside a little bit, so it just looks a little neater if I pull it out. Taste different pastes and you'll get an idea on what you actually like. Some are sweeter, some are more tart than others. We're actually now going to start to cook this paste down. So I raised the heat up a little bit and we're going to get it kind of caramelized. Now I'm going to come back over here and just try and roll up my little meatballs. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to put some oil in the pan so that I can saute these little veal cheese balls and get those going in our short period of time that we have to do all of this stuff. Yeah, both my mother-in-law and father-in-law started getting ill a number of years ago. My mother-in-law started exhibiting some signs of Alzheimer's, and we moved them next door to us here in Westfield. As fate would have it, the house next door to us became available. We were able to sell their house and move them in. So between my wife and I and our kids and my brother-in-law Louis and his wife Madeline, who lived just a couple miles away in Mountainside, we were able to provide them with some really good quality of life and really good care for the last years of their life. Sadly, she passed a year ago Thanksgiving, and just about 13 months later, that was 2011. 2012, my father-in-law, after a long fight with Parkinson's, he passed just this past December. So with losing my dad the year before in 2011, our kids lost 3 grandparents in 2 years. But they had 4 grandparents for the first 18, 20 years of their life, so they were pretty lucky. And as I said, I'm always talking about family. We have some great experiences, great stories, and great recipes that they've all shared with us. My mother-in-law's eggplant was something that she made for any occasion. If you were having a baby, she said, let's make eggplant. If somebody died, we better bring eggplant. Communion, eggplant. A wedding, eggplant. No matter what happened, somebody's birthday, bring them over, we'll make eggplant. And her eggplant was simply delicious. It's actually, when you think of things called Parmesan, like eggplant Parmesan, it's the process in the way it's made, rather than having mozzarella cheese on top. We think of mozzarella cheese on top, and that's the classic Parmesan. But it's really that there's breading is done with the cheese. So, my father-in-law used to hand grate cheese for his wife. They'd buy 10-pound blocks, and he'd sit there and he'd hand grate the cheese. He'd sit there. He was in so deep love with his wife that he would sit there and watch her cook and grate cheese for an hour and a half. What a lesson in teaching someone about a loving relationship. This man was totally devoted to her since they started dating. So her eggplant, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a small batch. So let me see if this will peel nicely. I don't salt eggplant. She used to salt it, but to me, a bitter eggplant is a bitter eggplant. So I always just slice it up, and however it is, it is. It's not too salty, but if you like to salt your eggplant, you can lay out your pieces, salt them, and put weights on them so that the eggplant will start to leach out liquid. But again, I'm always under the belief that a bitter eggplant will be bitter no matter what you do to it. And I'd rather compensate with the way I'm cooking it rather than to get it too salty, because sometimes if you're not careful, you can wind up with a salty eggplant, which is a problem that's much harder to deal with. So we're just slicing the eggplant in thin slices. And some people don't even slice the skin off. Some people leave the skin off, but she was a very proper cook and liked to make everything as fine as possible. So I'll try and keep with that tradition today. May not need all of that. Put my other piece up here. Let me take a look at our meatballs and see if I can start to get them turn a little. Oh yes, cooking nicely. Meatballs are a funny thing, like gravy. Everybody has their own recipe, but more important, they have their own mixture of meat. My family's meatball recipe was always all beef. People mix beef, pork, veal, one or two or all. So ours was beef. My mother-in-law's was all veal. There's no wrong way to do it. It imparts different flavors and different textures. So you may make meatballs 6 different ways. There are restaurants opening up now that actually are specializing in meatballs. So I have this paste really cooking down and kind of caramelizing. You can see all those nice brown bits in this pot. She takes her tomatoes, whole cans of tomatoes, whatever the brand is that you like, and see how smooth this is? She puts them through a food mill or a blender. Just be careful if you put them in a blender not to blend them too much. And she makes it very, very smooth. So I put some in. I want to just start to mix this around and kind of deglaze, get some of those nice brown bits off the bottom of the pan. Let's see. And now I'm going to kind of pour this in. You have to be careful when you pour it. I tend to do this. I pour it into the ladle, otherwise it splashes up either on the person standing in front of you or onto your crisp white chef coat, or see, just got me right in the face. I don't know if you can see it all over my face. There it goes again. One little drop and it's all over. Let me do a quick cleanup here. Tomato sauce on my face. Now you know why I wear a black chef coat. You wear white, you have spots all over you in no time. And we're going to put a little bit of basil and parsley. Pat, maybe you can pick me a nice 2 leaves or 3 leaves of basil out front. It's that time of year where our basil, my mother-in-law would say, basinigol, is growing nicely. And then some parsley, Pat, in the fridge. So I want to get this to a simmer, and then I'm going to add my meat. Actually, I can start to add my meat right back in now. The pork and the beef, because that's going to cook nice and slow. Now you can see why I had to have some of this done ahead of time, because in order to cook this eggplant. So back to our eggplant. In between, we'll be turning our little veal cheese balls one more time here over. You know, they don't stay perfectly round unless you kind of lower them into the gravy. But she liked to fry hers. So we're just going to keep them going nicely. And she would always put the basil and the parsley in without chopping it up and pick it back out. If you remember when we started, I took out the onion and the garlic. She liked a very smooth gravy. And I'd never ever try and tell somebody how to make their gravy. Okay. So, the trick to the eggplant is that we're making a batter out of egg and cheese. My mother used to do flour, egg, and breadcrumb. Actually, my mother used to do egg and breadcrumb. It wasn't until I went to culinary school that I learned a technique called breading à l'anglaise, where you first put flour. So if I were doing this with breadcrumbs, I would flour them, then I would egg them, then I would put the cheese. The flour holds the egg, which holds the final coating. Well, in this case, let me put a little heat under this one over here, and some oil. In this case, we're adding simply Parmesan cheese or Pecorino Romano to make a batter. And then we'll dip these into that egg and cheese batter, which is kind of like a paste once you mix it up, and then we'll saute those. I'm going to bring a tray up here so that when I get those ready, I can start to put them on a tray with some paper towels. I think we are good. So, it is a pain in the neck. That's why I'm going to do it just with my fingers, just like this. Get a little more heat going. Line a few of them up. It's a messy job, but let me tell you, this is so wonderful. So much cheese, you can't go wrong. I'm actually spreading this with my fingers to get it to stick all over. Let's see if our oil is getting hot enough now. Messy, sticky, but wonderful. So it's actually a Parmesan coating on the eggplant. So now it makes a little more sense. Parmigiano. Yeah, it's Parmigiano because it's got a whole layer of Parmesan cheese right on the eggplant. Perhaps I should have put a little bit more egg in. When my mother-in-law was really in her advanced stages, we were cooking. I told you how much she loves cheese. We were cooking something, I think it was Bastira, and I had her in the kitchen just, kind of keeping her busy to make this little this little dish with me. And although she really didn't remember what we were doing, when we got all done, I told her to taste it. She looked at me, she said, "Needs more cheese." So we would laugh and say, no, I'm good. We'd laugh and say that, she still remembered certain things. I could start singing songs. She loved swing music, 40s music, Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, Artie Shaw. And if I started singing one of the songs, she'd start singing along with me. Even though in the very last days, she didn't know really any of us. She knew we were familiar, but she didn't know who we were. I think actually at the end she thought that I was a gentleman friend coming to try and court her, because she would get all excited when she saw me. She'd say, "Oh, I missed you. I was wondering when you would come and see me again." And she'd come sit right next to me. So it was quite amusing. So our gravy is starting to simmer now. Our eggplant is cooking nicely. I'm going to put our herbs in the gravy, the parsley and the basil. Oop, dropped my bowl with my mozzarella. So I'm going to slice up some mozzarella. She used to cut the mozzarella, and this was just like a square block of mozzarella, like a Palio or Sorrento or one of those. And we're going to use a small dish. Let me take a look. Beautiful. Look at that nice Parmigiano crust on that. Nice brown. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Got my little bowl here to collect my meatballs when they're done. I'm going to put a little bit of the pre-made gravy on my plate. You always have to watch that you're not burning yourself when you got this much stuff going on. Okay, start to take my eggplant. Can't even believe how good this smells. So, a little bit of eggplant, a little bit of mousse, a little bit of sauce. See, just a little bit. Put that little bit on the bottom. 3 more pieces of eggplant. Now the finish. Three more little pieces of mousse. We pop this right into an oven, get this melted. See, it's not drowning in the mozzarella, because we think mozzarella on top of something means Parmesan. Wrong. Parmesan is cooking it with the little crust of the Parmesan cheese. That's why I always see things Parmesan. Meatball Parmesan sandwich. Eggplant Parmesan sandwich. They take eggplant, they put sauce, gravy, whichever they're making, and then they put some mozzarella and they call it Parmesan, which is really not the way it's done. Pat, would you get me a nice colorful plate, one of our dinner plates? I have Pat here working with me feverishly today. We're doing so many things at one time. Our little meatballs, that little crusty piece right there. See that little piece right there? That's for me. That's my little tasting piece. Okay, just put that with my parm. It's like all cheese. Like a cheese fritter. Okay, I'm going to shut this off, give my gravy another stir. My mother-in-law wanted to feed the world. She never ever could run out of food. She could make 15 things for 5 people. She'd have a ton of each one. One time she got mad at me because I tried to slow her down to say, you don't need to make as much as, you don't understand. I'm out of one thing, people will think I didn't make enough food for them. It's an insult. So little by little, I started to really understand what she was trying to accomplish. And she always fed her entire family. She had, I don't know, I think she's one of 8 or 9. And right before she got married, her mom passed away at a very early age, in her early 50s. And she took care of all of her brothers and sisters. And went on to kind of get married just as kind of a little side thing. Her big focus not a side thing, that it was just a non-event, as much as her most important thing was taking care of the family. The wedding, we'll have the wedding. We don't have to go crazy with the big deal. They had a beautiful wedding and a nice reception. And oddly enough, we just found the bill for that wedding. It was, I think it was about $4 a person at a wonderful place in Jersey City called Bruno's. Bruno's was like a high-class place. It was like $3 or $4 a person for the wedding at Bruno's. Unbelievable. Let me take a look and see if our parm is parming. Another minute. Well, we did get a tremendous amount of stuff done in a short period of time. I'm going to just put our meatballs on here to show you the lovely veal cheesy balls. And then I'll pull that eggplant parm out and we'll take a look. I would scrape this pot with a piece of bread and get every last little scrap off. I like all these little crusty pieces that you can scrape off. Look at this. I put those right here on top because that'll be the first thing I'm going to pick off. So there's our wonderful little veal meatballs. Put this off to the side. This I'm going to keep right here. She would always, always, always sprinkle a little bit of cheese on the on anything she made. She made pasta, she put a little cheese before she served it. So, just to recap, we browned some onion and garlic and in regular olive oil, removed it from the pan. Then we browned some meat, some beef, some pork. We removed that from the pan, cooked our paste, kind of deglazed the pan a little bit with the tomato that we pureed in a blender. Put the meat back in. We didn't put the onion or the garlic back. That now cooks for a couple hours. We put some parsley, some basil in. Very, very simple gravy and a very, very smooth texture. We made our veal meatballs, which is veal and cheese and salt and pepper and egg, and our eggplant Parmesan, which we coated the eggplant in the Parmesan batter, Parmesan cheese or Pecorino Romano. She actually would use more Pecorino Romano than Parmesan. She liked the sharper taste. With egg, coated each one, fried them, little gravy, eggplant, little piece of mozzarella, eggplant, little gravy, little piece of mozzarella in the oven. You can see the mozz starts to melt and brown, and then she sprinkles with a little cheese. We'd have a big dish of macaroni, whatever kind she decided to make, a spaghetti linguine, penne, with the gravy, the other pieces of meat on the side, the meatballs, and the eggplant Parmesan. So if you were around in Jersey City when she was making the eggplant, you had a baby, you got married, you had a christening, she was bringing eggplant. Folks, I'm David Martone, Executive Chef at Classic Time Cooking School here in Westfield, New Jersey, and today I'm celebrating the life of Nana, Jean, my good friend, my mother-in-law. Thank you.